Okay. My name is Stephanie Ashley. I'm a student here at UAS. I work with, I'm part student government as vice president, and we work on sustainability through there and working on recycling, working on food service and sustainability through food service and through on-campus recycling, reducing, reusing, that kind of stuff. Is there something else?
Sure.
Marquam George, I'm a construction technology faculty here at UAS. I haven't thought too much about UAS as a sustainable entity yet. I've been kind of thinking of a community or building or smaller scale. But I guess my concept of an individual to the university probably wouldn't change much. Be threefold. It'd be looking at structures, systems, and behavior. And taking those each individually, I think that we can start making big differences. And I think it has to be, the behavior is the overriding component for me, because if you want to change, you'll make changes both to structure and systems. And behavior is going to be the most difficult, but the first one that we can change easily. And I think that changing something like an institution is going to have to take each of us individually to make that as a collective change and to force that change. So I'm going to push for the building systems, the infrastructure that we put there, and the individual that we can each make a difference.
I'm Michael Ciri. I'm the Director of Information Technology Services here at UAS. And it's interesting thinking today about the ways in which technology is the solution and technology is the problem. It was really nice to see us be able to have our first speaker of the day come in over video conferencing. You just try to imagine what the carbon footprint savings was by not having them fly down here, fly back up again, and all the other transportation costs entailed in that. Is exciting, and I enjoyed the presentation very much. I think it had it a lot, and it's nice to not have to have burned all that fossil fuel and stuff to bring it down here. By the same token, I look at technology as being sort of like the big box store that's open 24 hours a day. I don't hear anybody in any of these proposals. There's a committee on sustainability at UAS, and I somewhat jokingly and somewhat not jokingly said, the one thing I don't hear talked about is, should I shut out the lights, like at least between midnight and 8 a.m. And just turn down. I'm burning, I've got all the servers and networks and things running 24/7, 365. There's a lot of energy being consumed there. And yet, I don't hear anybody asking for that. And to me, it's part of the culture. There is an expectation that if I get up 3:30 in the morning and I want to go on Wikipedia, I'm going to be able to do that. And frankly, Wikipedia is going to be turned on 24 hours a day. So I've got some real concerns as a technologist just about that. We have a lot of very ecologically minded people who still want to have access to all these information resources 24 hours a day. And to me, that's an example of society still not getting it. And going back to Alex's points earlier, there is a connection there. There is energy and resources being expended for that convenience. So I'm concerned about that. There are some new approaches we're doing here at UAS trying to solve some typical challenges. It takes a lot of energy to run all these servers and systems. It takes a lot of energy to cool just the rooms where this equipment is. And so we have technologies, things like virtualized server environments. That is, instead of buying lots of separate computer servers, okay, this is the mail server and this is the file server and the print server, we can buy a single piece of hardware now and actually carve up bits of it. And so we don't have either the physical materials that would go into manufacturing those things. We can also make better use of the resources. So if the print server only needs to operate while somebody's actually printing, well, if that can be a shared resource amongst all these services, we don't need to buy as many things. And so we're converting all of our systems to that. There's some basic things that we were doing anyway, which looked through the lens of ecologically mindedness suddenly makes some more sense. Converting from, CRTs displays to flat screens saves an enormous amount of energy, and there's less just material involved in that. At UAS, we've got a program trying to convert many of our faculty and staff from desktop computers to laptops, which has multiple benefits. First of all, they consume much less power, But also oftentimes, if a faculty member needed a laptop, they'd have a desktop computer and a laptop computer. So this way, if we can consolidate it, we save resources and we save energy. But still, as I look at the challenges we face, the biggest one that kind of keeps me scratching my head is the waste stream. As we say, okay, everybody wants the latest and greatest, and as we need to move out 50 computers out of computer labs and whatnot, if I've got a whole bunch of 2.4 gigahertz computers at the Bill Ray Center that need to come out, do they go to the landfill? Do they? That seems incredibly wasteful.
Tech first.
What do we do with these things? In many ways, I can't give them away. The software licensing that for anything that was on there, you have to wipe all the hard drives. I don't have any good answers. That's the thing that actually, on a very practical level, I struggle with the most. You've got this wall of computers, and do I just ask Keith to haul them to the dump? I don't really know. I don't have a good answer. I'm done.
Well, thank you everyone for attending. I'm Annie Dawson, and I'm a student in the Outdoor Skills and Leadership program here, which is just a one-year program. So I'm new to Juneau and new to Alaska as of August. I've spent the year sort of working with the Sustainability Committee a bit, also attending Southeast Alaska Conservation Council meetings. I just attended a Juneau Commission on Sustainability meeting recently and was very pleased to know that they are meeting soon to have a retreat where they will take a lot of the ideas, I think, from this sustainability forum and really start partnering with community organizations, both nonprofit and profit, in order to basically collaborate on a lot of solutions for our Juneau community. So I do think that in terms of the university, we have a huge responsibility, students, faculty, and staff, to engage with, for example, the Juneau Commission on Sustainability and these other community organizations to start basically building relationships. And in thinking about that concept, I just emailed one of my mentors, Alicia Chavez. She's the former University of New Mexico Taos president, campus director, and I had the opportunity a few years ago to shadow her while she was in that role. And during that summer, she had actually hosted an economic sustainability summit for northern New Mexico. And I asked her through email, I said, by the way, how did you do that? Like, how did you get together people from the northern New Mexico community? There were like native elders and businesses and faculty. How did you get everybody together to start collaborating? And she said, old cultures like many of those in Alaska really understand and live within the power of building long-lasting relationships. She reached out to one individual leader after another and finally was able to just kind of spread the word and get people together to start focusing on specific strategic goals and specific objectives and outcomes for the community. And she feels that it has been successful. There's a summit on sustainability in higher education coming up in northern New Mexico, and a lot of the faculty and staff that were originally involved in that effort, which was back in the summer of 2003, are now being called upon internationally and nationally to share some of their efforts. So I guess that's what I have to say. I also think that perhaps I've recently become acquainted with Pat Brown, the Dean of Arts and Sciences, and I wondered if maybe sustainability education, could be integrated across the curriculum. I'm sure that that's already probably being discussed, but in terms of environmental ethics and course requirements that get students engaged in the community with co-ops and internships and service learning, incorporating paid student internships to focus on sustainability things, I think would get more students involved in some of the efforts. And also I wanted to thank Dean Brown, because he had the idea of maybe getting together some students so that we can sort of bridge the gap between what students think and what some of their current behaviors and practices are. Have a meeting with some of the administrators and faculty who are doing research, meet with students, and have real dialogue about what are solutions that we can do together. How can we get you students involved with our research and with some of the things that we're trying to do here at the university. So I think this is an awesome university, and there's just so much opportunity right now. We're in a really good place with this Sustainability Forum and with all of the organizations that I see on the Sustainable Juneau website that are becoming connected and building relationships. So I feel really positive about the direction that everyone's going.
Hi, my name's Keith Kirk, and I'm the Director of Facility Services at UAS. And I'm going to take a couple of minutes just to give people a flavor of what kind of energy we use here, how much of it we use here, where it goes, and what we've been doing to try to manage it. This first slide is in dollars. This is what in the prior fiscal year we spent actually on all utilities. You can see there's a slice up there for $70,000 worth of waste, taking stuff to the dump, essentially, including Mike's computers that he can no longer use, and $27,000 worth of water sewer bills to the city. And you'll see the other three big pieces are all the energy pieces. And again, these are dollars, not energy, so this is money. Of those three pieces, you can see the fuel oil chunk over there is a big one. And over here, I call it electric power. The one on the bottom there says electric heat. When AEL&P talked this morning about their non-firm customers, essentially that excess of hydropower that they sell to people who could use it, people who had dual fuel systems. The university is one of those customers. We've basically provided about 40% of our building heat, our space heating, with this excess hydropower at a reduced rate, tied to the price of oil. For 20 years or thereabouts. And my sense is it's been a good deal for both parties. That chunk got turned off last November. That's on the graph we saw this morning, where demand intersected what can be delivered from the current hydro system. When that ended, we were one of those customers who switched back to fuel oil. So this is last fiscal year. The fiscal year we're in today, that chunk is being absorbed over there into the fuel oil segment. And I know that we spent $322,000 in '07 on fuel oil. That's already over $500,000 in the current year. We got 3 months to go. Of course, the price is also higher as well. So that's where the money goes. Do I just hit the right arrow here? What's the, oh, there it is. I know, I got to get there. This is not dollars. This is basically equivalent BTUs. And these are the physical spaces that energy gets delivered to. Most of these chunks of the pie are buildings. You see the largest chunk here, the Egan Library and Classroom. 18% of our energy goes into the building we're in here. It includes this classroom wing and the library. Some of these are groups of buildings. The one next to it that is labeled Lakeside Complex is actually the 7 buildings that are kind of across the road here, the 5 along the road and the 2 annexes. We lumped them together simply because the way the campus was built there, those 7 buildings have 2 electric meters and 2 fuel tanks and some other things. So we can only really kind of examine them as if they were a building. And on this pie, part of how you get to be a big piece is you get to be a big building. The Egan Library is our largest building. The Student Rec Center up there is our next largest building, so it comes in at 12%. You can see, and there's a great mix of types of buildings here. I'll show you on the slide in the middle in a minute to show you how different they can be. Those 3 pieces there add up to about 20%, and that's our resident housing facilities. So housing's a different piece, but you can see that's where it gets delivered, but not all buildings are the same. This chart is essentially kind of the miles per gallon equivalent for a building as opposed to a vehicle. This is BTUs per square foot per year. So this is looking at the energy efficiency of each of these buildings or groups of buildings. It's the same list that was on the previous one. See those 2 that look like high-rise. Those are our least efficient buildings. Those are our 2 science buildings. That's not an uncommon event. I read about one of the University of California campuses recently that has somewhere between 150 and 175 buildings, 8 of which use 60% of their energy. And they're their laboratory buildings. The laboratory buildings have a huge ventilation requirement. Their air not only gets moved through the building, but it gets moved straight outdoors, so you're reheating a lot of outdoor air. They've got hazardous material storage, and they've got a lot of issues which make them big energy users on a square foot basis. The if you look on the scale there, 115 on that scale is what the average commercial building in the United States used per year in 2005. And you can say most of our buildings are around that point. Most of our buildings are commercial. The residential ones you can see actually are generally more efficient. They don't have as many systems, you know. So this gives you a sense, and the message here is that when you think about how to save energy in a building, you really have to look at what's going on in that building, who's using it, how's it being used, because the solutions to energy conservation can be very different. This is not us. This is some federal agency's view of a commercial building. Commercial buildings really are very different from residential buildings. I think somebody this morning mentioned that, maybe it was somebody in the audience, 40% of, I think, the primary energy use in the United States is buildings. A little over half of that is residential. So residential buildings are a big piece of U.S. energy demand. And a little less than half of that 40% goes into commercial buildings. Most of the university's buildings would fall into what we'd call commercial buildings. And so this is an average, so obviously it's no building at all. But if you notice, lighting always comes out to be a big chunk. And every time I've ever seen one of these analyses done on a group of buildings or a single building, lighting is huge. In a commercial building, lights are always a big piece of it, of the energy. And then you see space heating, space cooling, water heating, ventilation. Those pieces, don't have a pointer, but basically those pieces starting from lighting and going clockwise around the ventilation, those are the pieces that I'd put in the kind of the technical realm. That's where facilities kind of attacks our energy use, because that's what we can control. We can put in more efficient lighting, as we do. We can put in lighting occupancy sensors in rooms to turn the lights off when people aren't using them. So we spend a lot of money on lighting, a lot of money trying to make space heating more efficient. Our space cooling percentage of the pie is probably much smaller than that because we're in Alaska, we're not in Arizona. But ventilation and water heating, those are clearly smaller pieces, and we try to make our energy conservation investments in those places that have the biggest return. So lighting and heating, those are generally what we do. When you get into electronics and some of those others, and the adjustment one, we don't even want to talk about, it's too complicated. But those other ones are more in the nature of the things that the building occupants can affect. The electronics is all the stuff we bring and plug in and use. And so that segment, I believe, has grown over years as we simply all have more stuff that requires electricity. Even when it's running on a battery, it's still got to get charged somewhere. And I always see people plugging in everywhere around the university to charge their batteries. So this just gives you a sense about where energy goes in a typical commercial building. And we look at our energy conservation investments with this in mind. This is an example of also what we talked about this morning and I mentioned a minute ago, where we used to provide a significant amount of our space heating with the non-interruptible electric boilers, which up until now were 99.5% hydropower. So the bar on the left is the 5 months in the winter of 06-07. Banfield Hall is one of the buildings that has a dual fuel system. It's got an electric boiler and it's got oil boilers. And so in the 5 months in the winter of 06-07, we used a little bit of fuel oil. And the bright green piece is the interruptible electric power that we heated the building with. And then the top piece is regular commercial rate power. The interruptible power appliances are all metered separately, partly so they can be turned off when they can't afford to provide that. So you can basically, and then this bar over here is the same picture for the 5 months we just ended. A year later, the same 5 months, a year later. We did have some interruptible heat in November, so there's still a little bit of green in there, but you can basically see that we displaced that green hydro energy with this purple stuff over here, that's fuel oil. So that's just a diagram to kind of explain how the fact that we've come up against the ceiling of our hydro capacity in the community has affected how we're heating that building. And that's one of 8 buildings. We have 8 buildings that have traditionally been heated with the interruptible electric systems. Oh, yeah, and this is basically the same picture for the whole campus for those same 5 months. And you can see that it's not as stark a change because we have lots of buildings that have never been on that system. But that shows that basically we've gone from a majority of providing our energy with electricity to a minority of providing our, and these are all in equivalent BTUs. This is my last slide, and this is my sort of big picture of time and fuel source and the dotted line I'll talk about in a second. Well, I'll talk about that first. The dotted line is the BTUs per square foot by year. Like that chart I showed you before where the science buildings went way up high and the other buildings were down lower. The reason I put that in there is because in FY07 we have 1/3 more square feet of building than we did in FY01. So you have to take into account you got a bigger physical plant to heat and light and ventilate. And so that red line takes that into account. And you can see it wobbled there for a couple of years and then it's leveled out. My ideal would be that line would be downward, that we would each year be making the campus buildings as a system more and more efficient on a BTUs per square foot basis. Right now we're not. And we've been investing quite a bit of money each year in lighting replacements, variable frequency drives for big fan units, a number of occupancy sensors, those kinds of things, which should be, and I believe are, reducing our energy use in those places where we're making those improvements. But something else is also driving the energy use up, and it's probably us. Part of it is, I'm pretty sure from having worked here from that time to this time, that we're using our buildings more. There are events going on in rooms like this that the university has actually been wanting to have happen to make the university a more exciting place to be, have more things happen. I think we have more events. I think our hours are more, if you have more people, you've got the door open more often and you get the lights on more often and things like that. So my desire is that we can work on bringing that down. My sense is that that's going to take more than the continued reinvestment in technological and system improvements that we're making, and it's going to take people making those human behavioral changes, whatever those might be. In terms of where we go from here, I guess I'm an architect, but my sense is that a few people have said this same thing I think already before, is that the biggest thing UAS can do is probably teach science and management and political science and sociology and more science, and because essentially the knowledge base of the population is going to be what drives what everybody does in the future. And people like me will come and go, and somebody else will have to do this. But fundamentally, it's the decision makers of tomorrow and what they know, or how they make decisions. That's probably the most important thing we can all invest our time in. That's all I've got for that. And I don't know what Kevin wants to do next.
So we have a little more than 30 minutes. So our hope is that we can ask our experts here some questions and also potentially talk about things that are happening here on campus or in Juneau, either way. So again, please wait for the microphone, but now's the time to ask questions, share your thoughts.
And if you have more recommendations for how UAS can improve its sustainability aspect, then shoot it fire away.
Just curious about, I was asking about the servers. What do you know what the energy demand on that is, and what kind of battery backup system do you have, and do you have a budget for improvements?
Okay, several questions. Do we have a battery backup system? Yes. So are you asking what kind it is? We have what we, as you can imagine, you see the movies, you got racks full of computers and other components. And the way we move it is our primary equipment room has a large battery backup for the building, essentially. But each one of the racks also has a battery backup because you want everything to be redundant. The servers are all built to simultaneously draw upon both. The idea being that, again, everything has to be uninterruptible if possible. So if we lose a battery system, we want another one to already be there and connected up. So we've got those deployed. In terms of what the energy consumption per server is, no, I don't have that information on
Well,
it.
it's just curious if you could charge your batteries at night when it's cheap and run off the batteries during the day when it's not. Since you have a redundant system anyway, you know, you have to cycle through the batteries anyway because they can't sustain but so many charge-discharge cycles. So you would just be utilizing an underutilized resource.
The batteries are actually always charged. The only times they discharge is when the power goes out. So it's not like we run off the batteries during the day and then we can recharge during the night. The batteries themselves, and I wish we had the fellow who sold inverters because he could actually answer it better than I could. But essentially, it would be as if you had your laptop plugged into the wall all the time.
Mm-hmm.
The only time you'd actually be drawing down the battery is if the power went out.
I have a couple ideas for you that have been used in other places. You can give a call. I'll give you my number.
Please touch base with me. I'd love to hear what you had.
I'm wondering how on a campus you can harvest some of the ideas that students will provide, because I think students will, if we went to students, Annie would probably be able to tell us more about this, but if we went to students and said, what can we do to reduce the costs, the electric bill of the campus, and tell them why, I think they would give a number of different suggestions that would be useful. Let me give you a sense, though, of some of the obstacles that I worry about. One is when I walk home in the evenings in the winter here, I go through lit parking lots and see the noise pavilion completely lit at night. And it'll be lit deep into the night. From what I can tell, it's lit all night. And I don't know, my suspicion is it's costly to try to get somebody, and the system is probably not set up to easily disengage those lights, or that there might be insurance liability issues or something like that. So somehow, I mean, you have these intuitive suggestions that look like they might have some traction, and the students will come up with a lot of those, I think, as well as faculty and staff that work here. But how do we vet those and then get an answer back so that we can all understand what we work under for constraints? Because there are some constraints, and I don't think that I fully understand that. I think probably the biggest thing is to make staff, faculty, and students understand the problem so that individually we can turn those switches off when we need to. But anyway, I'll open that up. I don't know if you can enlighten that for me.
Couple things. One, the parking lot lights are set up, half of them go off, I think at midnight. And yeah, the rest of them stay on. Outside light, I guess the broader issue is outside light. We've had lots of discussions about external lighting. The comment we mostly get from students is, why is it so dark? It's kind of like the first question on the comments on the survey, why does it rain so much in June? Maybe they're connected, I don't know. I'm not a scientist. So part of this is kind of back to, what size house do you want also? People want it to be brighter here. We've also got, although they're now LED lights, we put up a bunch of lights and leave them up all winter, colorful things and stuff like that. And partly to brighten the place up, that's a pretty small energy use, those lights, compared to parking lot lights. Parking lot lights do use a lot of energy. But we generally get the comment that people want more outside light because they don't feel it's safe enough. And feeling safe late at night in what's already a dark environment, often wet. Yeah, so you get in that what are people willing to live with? We can make them go off. We can turn them off entirely. That probably doesn't make sense. You have to have some amount of light, during the evening. And they're not. And the technology of those kinds of lights, and this could change. There's a lot of stuff changing in technology, but right now it would not be a good idea to turn those lights on and off like with a motion detector. Now there's a lot of. They're actually Anchorage is making a huge effort on outside lighting. They've got a whole program. They brought in, I heard, 80 experts. I think this was just recently. I don't know if anybody else has heard about this, to talk specifically about the community lighting and how it contributes to the feeling of the city. And they're looking at serious investment in new technologies. LEDs is one of them. You can buy an LED street light right now. Uses a lot less energy. Easier to switch on and off. You could do a motion detection kind of thing there. And I don't know what, I think we should keep an eye on what Anchorage is doing, because I think they're probably going to come up with some good ideas from what I've seen, and maybe incorporate some of those.
I know many of you got to Fairbanks, but across the street from UAF at the Cold Climate Housing Research Center, their entire exterior lighting now is LED. It's, the total wattage is 165 watts. So, I mean, the technology is moving there.
So as you're watching Anchorage, I don't know if you're looking at also what in Iowa at Maharishi University, the energy and sustainability. Well, I'd just turn you on to that, and you could check out what they're doing. And they've created whole community cities that are off the power grid and sustaining themselves. So when you're talking about the community, as you guys were saying, that's one thing that you could look at. I was wondering, I wonder if there's a creative way that you could work with some of the student leadership in your promotion of awareness and things, you know, like where you turn down thermostat for 5 degrees and everybody has fun wearing parkas in class and things like that. So have you tried any creative approaches like that just to help people have experiential and to take personal responsibility like that?
No, I think kind of reminds me of the suggestion that AELMP have a race structure that nobody likes. I mean, we are, it's one of those things where our sense from facilities point of view is we're here to give people what they want. Mm-hmm. And that isn't what we hear. You know, what we hear is, we do get calls that it's too hot. We do get calls that it's too cold. It's often in the same room at the same time from different people. So I mean, comfort is we're not all the same. You know, we're all equally unique, or whatever, however you say that now. But I mean, I'd be willing to look at those things if students had an idea about you know, having a cold day or whatever. I think it'd be fun.
Yeah, actually, we were discussing that yesterday, making incentives for students on campus housing to turn their thermostats on, use lower amounts of energy, or different incentives for students to do that, like give them a reward at the end of the semester if they were under a certain percentage energy used in their apartment that day. We talked with Tish about controlling room temperatures on campus in the classrooms, like if they're not used at certain times of the day, can we turn the temperature off down below a certain temperature so that heat is not being used in that classroom if that classroom is not being used that day. So there's some things in the works that just started being talked about this week with our student group that I'm involved in and stuff like that. So there's some talk about it now, so it can start being used maybe next semester.
And I think students need to initiate those negotiations with the administration, you know, for students to say, hey, we'll reduce our energy consumption in this way if you guys do this for us. I don't know, we'll be okay with you turning the lights off of the pavilion, you know, every night, but give us some free headlamps for orientation or something, you know, something like that. But yeah, I'd like to see more from students. I think I've tried a little bit to work with some professors and try to get students engaged, and I know people care about it, but I think it's time to see more action that students need to initiate on their own. So I'd like to see more of that.
Speaking as an administrator, I guess part of the question was how do we hear from students, or what do we hear from students? And there are a variety of, I would say there's a variety of existing channels. I mean, student leadership is one very clear channel that there's teaching and learning. In my area, there's the Teaching, Learning, and Technology Roundtable, which we always struggle to get student participation in and whatnot. I could probably, I've been around here a long time, I could probably count easily on one hand with maybe a couple fingers missing how many times a student has come to me with any kind of a sustainability concern. I could probably count much more easily, or I would not be able to count as easily how many times they come and ask me, when you're going to replace the computers in the computer lab. Can you get faster printers? Can we get faster these types of things. And I understand. These are the tools that we need to do the work that we need to do. Those are not necessarily, and so sustainability, usually the discussion that I get into is how are we going to sustain the latest and greatest in our computer labs and classrooms? Sustainability means can we get brighter projectors so we can see the screen better? It's not about waste stream. It's not, things that concern me are huge piles of abandoned printouts in computer labs and in the library. And how do we engage with students to get to recognize, yes, you can print the 200-page website very quickly and then decide you don't need it, but is that sustainable? And so I would love to see a discussion go on campus because it's ecological sustainability, it's also financial stability, sustainability for the institution. Just good use of our financial resources. If I don't have to pay for so much paper, maybe I can buy better monitors.
Part of what Michael's saying, and a couple other people have touched on it, is there's not much of a connection between what you use and what you pay for. The fume hoods, I'm looking at Ciri now, the fume hoods in the Anderson building are always on. Do they always need to be on? Is there always something going on in them? I don't know. Ciri thinks there are. In housing, if you have your window open and the heat on. I know that goes on, right? That's when you get into the behavioral part. I think when you talk about taking responsibility, I think we do need an initiative which looks at who is taking responsibility and who isn't. Maybe you don't even change it, but at least find out who that is, who's willing or who isn't. What are the circumstances in which that's important in terms of if it's energy consumption you're talking about, where you can really have an impact on that. I think there's a lot we don't know about. Where those opportunities are, where the biggest leaks are that we could talk to people and provide them with incentives to take that responsibility. Right now there aren't many, or any.
So my question is, I'm just curious as to how much do we turn down the thermostats at night in the buildings on campus? Sometimes I've wandered around at really odd hours here, and I don't remember ever being cold in a building.
Yeah, every building, all these buildings are run by a computer, and the computer tells the different systems what to do. And in the winter time, and they all have what's called an unoccupied mode, which we put in what time that is. It tends to be somewhere between 11 and 12 at night that the buildings go into unoccupied mode, which generally means that the temperature goes down a few degrees and the fans get turned off. Fans and depending on the time of year, the pump that moves hot water through the system may stay on, actually. One of the problems we have is we have buildings freeze up. We almost got through this winter without having something freeze up. And we had two things freeze up. We had two really cold spells, even though it was kind of a normal winter. These buildings just are not bulletproof. So we actually don't want them to get too cold at night, but they do use less energy in that unoccupied mode. And it's automated, and we can change that. We could make it earlier. I think that's one of those things where my sense is that our total occupied hours are greater now than they were 5, certainly 10 years ago. And it's kind of like the issue in the survey, do you want to tell all the box stores to close at 9 p.m.? Well, hey, Juno will save a lot of energy. Then you can do something instead of wandering around Walmart thinking what you don't need. You can you can stay home and do I don't know what, but we'd save energy. It's clear. There's no question. We'd save energy, right? Are people going to do that? I don't think so. And I think the survey said that people weren't interested, didn't think that was a good idea. Whether it's a libertarian view or because they really want to go shopping late at night, I don't know. But I think the same thing's true here. We could make maybe the buildings should go cold at 6 p.m.
Maybe the internet should get shut off at 3 a.m.
That's right. But I mean, we do have a fairly good peak of classes in the 5 to 8 p.m. time, and my guess is that we'll hear from those people if
it gets cold.
If it gets cold.
Let me just clarify this. My point is, in the really off hours, like midnight, 5 or 6 in the morning, how much does it really turn down?
Because it doesn't seem that cold during those hours when there's virtually
Yeah,
nobody.
and we don't want it to be cold, because if it gets too cold, then you have to turn it on at 3 a.m. to get it warm enough by 7. It takes a long time. It's a huge mass in these buildings. If you let them get too cold, you can't get them hot enough during the day. In fact, when we get the cold spells of anything below, say, 10 or 15 degrees, we have sometimes eliminated the occupancy mode because otherwise we can't get the buildings up to normal operating temperature. If once you let them get down, the momentum just gets too great. If you get down to 0, you really can't do it. If you even in weekend mode, we have to keep them warm all weekend. Or Monday morning, everybody's calling, unhappy about how cold it is everywhere. So there's a thermodynamic issue there. But they do get cooler, and by turning the fans off, you're eliminating a pretty big consumption part of the buildings. Big fan, 2 big fans up above this building that move all the air through it. And they go to sleep.
Ironically, when Keith makes some of these modifications, he tends to hear from me, because as he turns fans off, places where I've got equipment might start getting warm. I mean, there's impacts downstream, and I get to be one of these people saying, no, I've got to keep everything running 24/7. So, I got to stay within these 5-degree variations in temperature. So it's very complicated. You're virtually on campus even when you're at home.
Keith, I'd like to shut those fume hoods off. I think we're not allowed to in Bentwood, but yeah, we definitely should be able to shut them off if we're not using fumable material, but it's definitely a venting issue. I teach biology, so I do have students on more than the fingers on one hand discuss sustainability issues, whether it's recyclable cups or can UAS provide all students coffee mugs so they don't always have to change out mugs. Or the latest one, and for me, my answer is always difficult because it's a problem of scale. UAS is very small, but the latest discussion was on transportation. And we've always had the issue between Anderson and the main building. Not that far, people walk it, and we used to have a shuttle, but the shuttle used a lot of fuel for the amount of students shuttled around. And they thought a bicycle transport mechanism would be great. And in some universities that are relatively large, they have the yellow bike system. And so students come up to me with ideas like this all the time, and would I like to mentor a bicycle exchange program? And I think it would be great if we had 10 times the amount of people here. But I could see like 15 bikes ending up at Anderson and sitting there. But if you want ideas from students, maybe there should be some collective area where we could put all the comments that we hear and how can we deal with these discussions. In one biology class, we discussed how I said I noticed older people brought bags to grocery stores, but I never saw younger people. And I said, what is it? Do you guys not use bags? And we started talking about it. And a number of students say, no, we just carry their single items out by individual, things like that. So we do talk about it, but it's kind of difficult to instigate really new ideas.
My question is, can somebody tell me what's going on with our recycling program? It seems like that's really student-driven, and they were big supporters or pushers on that whole idea, but it seems like it's still kind of limping along, and I wouldn't say it's the students' fault. How much are we supporting something like that I know the students have gotten behind?
I guess I'll do recycling. Recycling is completely supported by student government, and with the drop in student population or drop in registration, we have no money in student government to support it any further than it already is. So right now we're working on institutionalizing it in the university through facilities, and that's something we're trying really hard to get done by the end of the semester, where student government wouldn't be the one supporting it anymore. It'd be supported through facilities. That's something we're trying to get done. So we have to type up the memo and do all that stuff to give it to facilities. So if he hasn't heard about it now, now he has.
I didn't get that memo.
But yeah, that's our goal, so that it can be more productive on campus, because right now it's really difficult because it's completely student supported. And with the way the campus needs recycling done here, it has to be, if it needs, to work in the manner that it should work, it should be done through the university and not through student government anymore. So we're working on that. It's a big issue that we're working on right now.
And that wasn't a criticism of...
No. But yeah, a lot of people don't know that it's done through student government with a very limited amount of money. I mean, very, very limited. Because we get a limited amount of money, very little. And we try to do as much we can with recycling.
Good effort.
One of the questions that I have, whoever's thinking of the next question is thinking of it, one of the things I struggle with is how can I promote sustainable practices or adopt the services that I provide in a way that are more sustainable, or just try to educate people on the impact of abandoning all their printouts on the printer, without essentially coming off as being patronizing to the student body, or preaching to you all, that type of thing. It's something that I grapple with, because that's, I don't want to turn people off or turn people away, but it's something that I grapple with, is how do I, absent the appearance at least that students are coming to me wanting to engage in that discussion, if I just unilaterally say, okay, this is going to be our policy in the labs or whatnot, again, I run the risk of basically sending the message, these are my services, I'll let you use them. And that's not really what we're trying to do.
My question follows right up on what you were just speaking about, and that is, I wonder, do we have a portion of the population, maybe 5% or 10% or something, that always strives to do the right thing, morally, ethically, so on, but the other 90% will just never, ever get on board until it hits them, in the pocketbook. And so we can talk about educating, motivating, raising awareness and all this, but it just will not happen until it does become painful and you have to change your behavior. And then the second thing I'm thinking about is from this morning, is it true that we're about to peak in oil? And there was a very stark contrast between supply and demand in oil this morning in the graph, and you couldn't miss it. So is it like in 20 years, it is going to be painful. I mean, very painful, and there will not be any worry about do we need to, turn off the electricity at night or whatever. I mean, we're going to have to, period. And I don't think there's anyone in this room who has experience with this, because it hasn't happened in our generation. But anyone who wants to speculate on, are we going to hit the wall in 10 or so years, and then it won't be a matter of trying to hold sustainability forums to raise awareness, it's just going to happen?
Are you wanting us to comment on that?
Yes. Yeah, I think so.
Oh, you take that, Keith.
I'll tell you the truth, I saw that same chart in 1973.
Yeah.
I think the problem with that chart is that everybody is suspicious of who really knows where the oil is or how much is left. There's from the conspiracy theorists to the geological scientists. I think the safe thing to do is to find some alternative, because the chart could be right, and if it's not right, you still got an alternative. So I know lots of people who are environmentally oriented, who think the whole notion of oil coming to an end is in itself a conspiracy by the nuclear industry. I mean, so who knows? But like Yogi Berra said, making predictions is particularly difficult when you're talking about the future.
I'm going to change the bend of the conversation just a little bit. One way to warm a room is to put more people in it.
That's true.
So I congratulate the university on the number of full-time students we have right now, and let's work to bring more full-time students to our wonderful community and university. Another thing I think that the university should be proud of is the cooperative effort of National Guard Armory and UAS in building a building for recreational purposes. And I don't, maybe Keith could say a little bit more about that building and that cooperative use of space too, since we need to light it and heat it 24 hours a day and those kinds of things. And the third thing would be, I think part-time students might be encouraged to use Capital Transit more often if Capital Transit's express bus ran into the evening. And so again, an opportunity for the university and the city with a very subsidized mass transit system, but one that should work well for all of us. How do we work together to make that work even better? I think one thing is time classes so they start when the bus arrives. And I'd be interested in your comments. Thank you.
Well, I know about the evening bus thing. Student government used to pay for the bus to run here after 5 p.m. a few years back, and it was never used. So they had to stop paying for it because it was sucking up so much student government funds, because it was said there was a need for the bus to run after 5 p.m. for students that had later classes, but then the bus was running, I'm not sure how many semesters they did it, and the bus was never used after 5 p.m. So they stopped doing it. But you never know, if there's a need for it again, we could possibly bring it back. But we paid for the bus to come here after 5. Just so you know that it was done in the past.
One comment on the buses before I make my question clear. I've never been to a university where students have had to pay full price for a bus fare, and we can get half price for the month passes and for long-term passes, but and I hope I'm not offensive by saying this, but it's almost absurd that students and professors don't have free fare for Capital Transit. So to get to my comment, it seems to me that there's plenty of passion and plenty of knowledge about sustainability, especially on this campus, but what I don't see is active legislation that makes regulations that force people to do things, and that's a loaded comment and a more difficult question. But what kind of things are being done, and what kind of things would you guys like to see done on a more aggressive front?
I'm sorry, you saw me laugh here when you were talking, but I was reminded there was a while where I think I annoyed about the entire campus by going to every single printer and posting the Alaska state statute that says that all government agencies are to use both sides of the paper wherever feasible, and setting the default setting on all of our printers to print double-sided. And that still remains a struggle. There's many people who Cachet's nodding in the back. That's back to my question about working hand in hand, so that as we try to make these steps, even ones where there is regulation stipulating it, that this is seen as a partnership and not just evil IT or evil facilities imposing something.
Or evil.
Or evil, but that's actually a personal comment about us. But, what more would we like to see? I'd like to see it injected into the value system, right? I think that students hold me accountable for the quality of the technology, the reliability of the technology, whether the stuff they saw in the Dell catalog appears quickly in the computer labs. I don't hear students saying, "Wow, we have just great sustainable practices here on campus." I guess so. I'd like to see it clear that that's part of the value system. I don't know how we get there.
I think the point that I want to make is that the decisions that a legislation makes, whether it's a university or government or a small community, are the base ethical standards for that entire community. So I think the quickest, in fact, the most efficient way to make a value system more sustainable is to see more legislative measures being made.
Question, and I'm going to put administration on the spot. So Pat, that's you, and Carol, that's you, and any other administrators here. So right now we're dealing with a budgetary issue here, potential declining enrollments. We're in a squeeze. There's not enough money to go around. At the same time, clearly there's passion for sustainability. I mean, everyone's here. So, I mean, frankly, is the university, is UAS, are we willing financially to invest, the funds that it takes to potentially become more sustainable, because that's what it might take. It might take a little money to become more sustainable, and I guess. So I just, I just have a interest in hearing your comments.
Feeling that might be oriented toward me when you start to talk about money. There are many ways that we have to be more sustainable. We have to be more sustainable in the number of students that we have here as full-time students to actually build our capacity as a campus that has a student life centered curriculum and activities. We have lots of work to do, I think, but I think we have lots of potential. And in terms of this full-time student population, we have every reason to believe that in the fall that we will be up in terms of full-time students. So I think that is very positive. We have new people coming on board who are going to help lead that activity. We have a great faculty. We have more faculty resources than we've had before. So, we hit a blip and we've slid. But everyone who's in a leadership capacity at this university believes that we have many opportunities. We have greater support within the community than we've ever experienced before. We have a much larger array of academic programs than have been available to us before. We have some premier programs that we're very proud of. We've had the support of the legislature for new buildings. So we think we're close to having some of the core facilities that we need for our future growth. We're confident that we will grow. And in order to do that, that takes resources. But in order for us to be the kind of institution that I believe we say that we are, which is one that is concerned about the impact that we put on our environment, and that we bring students here believing that we have something very special for them to participate in, and that is in the environment that we live in, not only the academic programs, but the specialness of the place that we live in and that we study in and that we work in, and the opportunities that afford each and every one of us. So we believe we have something that's very special. And we believe we have not sold that maybe as well as we should have or could have. But we have every belief that the students that we have here are great students, and the faculty are great faculty, and our opportunities are many. And I believe you will find that there is a strong belief within the administrative structure of this university that there are things that we can do to make less of an impact on the environment that we live in, and we're concerned about that. And we're very happy that we have a sustainability task force, and we're really interested in making changes that will promote the sustainability of this institution, not only from how much carbon we burn, but how much, how we treat our students, how we treat our community, and how we support the state of Alaska in our curriculum. So, I don't know that that's the answer that you were looking for, but I think that to the extent we have available funds, they are going to be spent in those areas. Thanks, Sanjay.
Free money for sustainability. You heard it here. I'm going to hold you to that.
So let's take maybe one more question and to try and stay somewhere close to the schedule here. No one wants the last word?
Cache does.
Oh, okay.
Cache always wants the last word.
I just want to say I get so excited when I see everybody come to sustainability stuff because it's such important work, such an important time to be doing it. Couple of comments. I want to commend you guys for the sustainability work that's happening on campus. Mike, especially you, with the technology. We have just a great IT crew here at this university. And the double-sided printing is fantastic. So I don't know if this is going to offend some students, but lots of universities have student cards where you swipe and it deducts like a amount you pay, $20 or something, and then I'm a little nervous. Let me just breathe. Anyway, so charge the students for the papers, and then I think that will limit the amount of paper that we're printing, and I'm fine with that. I happen to be graduating in May and moving on, but I plan to come here and use the university.
So you've already printed yours.
Yeah. So, I mean, is that something that you guys are looking at? Because I think it would be a good way to help instill a value in some students who might not have it.
Well, actually, we do a similar thing right now with color printing in the media department, where for students we say, okay, you got 100 prints on the color printer, and then that's it. So there's some budgeting that goes on, and it's we have been looking at swipe card access to the printers. There's been a debate about whether that's just for print monitoring, or whether it's how exactly we would be leveraging it. Again, our interest is not that this is some kind of revenue generation piece of it, but it is trying to get a handle on, if it is just 5% of 2% of students that are printing all that, it'd be nice to get under control. What I can say is that it would certainly give me a lot more confidence in moving forward if that could come with some sort of encouragement or endorsement from the student body. So that, I guess I'm looking over at people who might be in sort of influential student roles, that as something where students are saying this might be a good idea and this might be a sustainable measure.
And on that note, I would like to encourage people to write letters to the student government. You're looking at the next student body president, who, lucky for us, is very sustainable minded, and I really appreciate that about her. But student government is a great organization, student run, who really cares what's happening. They have a committee that's looking at sustainability on campus. And if anyone has a concern, you can definitely shoot them a letter or an email, and they do look at those and can lead activity on the student body in this way. And this woman, who was suggesting about bikes. I would love to see, right here at the roundabout, a bike rack of 15 yellow bikes, and then have people, some kind of system set up. I don't know what it would be, but a little bit of research where people can drive them back and forth. And that's something that you'd see as soon as you pull onto campus. You'd see that, and you'd know that this is a green campus. So, yeah. Anyway, good job, UAS. You've been special in my life.
Just one quick comment to add to what Kashi said. The Sustainability Committee meets roughly once a month, second Wednesday of the month traditionally. So that's totally open. That's there's been some discussion of how do we get students, what's the conduit that we can get students or suggestions from staff or anyone. Actually, CBJ has even been attending that. So that's an opportunity for people to get involved. Anybody here knows about it right now, so get in touch with us.
So thank you for the panelists, and thank you, Alex Simon.
In Alaska's counter.